Okay, I think we're good to go. Stephen, do you want to just give me a nod to let me know that you're ready to, yeah, Dean, happy?
All good.
Perfect. Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to today's Autumn Series session. I'm Sarah from M+H and we're thrilled to be able to bring this whole series to you completely free of charge in partnership with Smartify. Today we've got Stephen Spencer from Stephen Spencer and Associates, and we've got Dean Ford from the Modern Agency, and they're talking about why building back better is the worst thing you can do for 2021. And we're so excited to have them here with us today. I'm just going to run through some very quick housekeeping things just to make sure that we all understand how today's session is going to work. So if I've already mentioned this, apologies those who heard it from the beginning. If you want to introduce yourselves in the chat, that's a really great way so that we can all find out who's on the call and who's present for today's session. You can also rename your profile on your Zoom account, just for the purposes of this session, with your organisation name after your name, so people know where you're from when you are communicating. We encourage questions. Please use the chat box. All three, myself, Stephen and Dean, will be picking up the questions throughout the call. And we'd love to hear your take on it. It's a very open session. If what Stephen or Dean are talking about you don't quite understand, or actually you've got really good examples of it, please do pop that in the chat. We want to make sure that this is as positive and as helpful for the participants as we can. The recording will be made available. We're hoping for about 40 minutes today, but if it does run over and you need to go, no problem at all. The recording will be available. It will be available in exactly the same place where you picked up the access details, and it will probably be available there probably tomorrow afternoon. I think I've done everything else that I need to do. So on that note, I am going to hand over to Stephen from Stephen Spencer Associates to kick us off. Thanks so much, Stephen.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and I'm just going to share my screen now. Okay, this is, here we go. I don't know why that's not. Okay. Right. Okay. Sorry about that. Just to prove we are live. It's lovely to be part of the Museums and Heritage Show autumn season, and congratulations to Sarah and the team for making that happen. All very sad that the show itself didn't happen in its normal form this year, and it's been great working with Sarah and the team at the Museums and Heritage Show for a number of years. I'm also delighted to be joined by Dean Ford, who is not only one of our associates, but also creative director of the Modern Agency. We're not going to spend a lot of time on introductions this morning because that's very boring, but just to say that Stephen Spencer Associates has been around for about 6 years. And what with one thing and another in 2020, we decided to put a focus on the associates going forward and create a collaborative full service consultancy that is kind of led by the idea that basically whatever you do, it's how your customer, your audience, your visitor experiences it that will determine your success. So we are going to throw some ideas around. We're very much encouraging you to chat with us, to challenge us, to ask us questions, and to give us examples that you might feel others would benefit from of the ideas that we're going to share. Just checking, can you see a slide that says this webinar is in 4 parts?
No.
No.
We've still got your screen with the wrong slide on at the moment.
Right, I've got something that says my...
there we go. It's just scrolled up there now.
Right.
So
and
you're able to play that.
Is that appearing? It's not appearing for some reason.
I can see it. There's a little box that says resume slideshow on that first slide on the left. Can you see that box at your side? Does that make it?
Yeah.
There you go back. That's better.
Goodness me, I have no idea what happened there. Many apologies for that. So we're going to, in this session, think about where we have been and where we're going in the context of what it means for building back better, or indeed what we suggest you do instead of building back better. We're going to think about experience, because we've all been through a shared and as well as individual experience in 2020. So casting our minds back to where we were before and casting our minds forward to where we're going. The importance of understanding who your audiences are now, or your customers. Some of you may be from commercial organizations within cultural institutions, or you may be leading cultural institutions. So I will use the terms customer, visitor, and audience interchangeably. And then we'll have some case studies and techniques for planning the future. I can't guarantee that we'll do this in the order that we've suggested here, but we will cover all of this. So where we've been recently, now this is really thinking not just about what's happened with the pandemic, but also where we were before. Do you remember there was that sort of window between what seemed like the end of Brexit last year and the start of the pandemic? We were focused on climate change, and a sort of triumvirate of Greta Thunberg, Extinction Rebellion, and David Attenborough really had this sort of top of mind. Although it didn't really appear that there was much hope, I have to say. There was just a lot of noise being generated. And some museums actively collaborating, even with Extinction Rebellion, others being challenged by them, and certainly for all museums having to sort of get their heads around what this meant. And also, of course, Black Lives Matter and ideas around in terms of where collections and museums came from, what they contain, where that came from, and also ideas around diversity and inclusivity. And then, you know, just what do we do about it? What do we say about it? What do we do about it? How do we want people to think about it? How do we want people to respond? What is a museum to do if it feels, and indeed historic houses is another area similarly challenged. You know, what do we do if we feel like where we've come from is somewhere that today we feel very uncomfortable about? And then it doesn't seem that long ago that we were thinking about over-tourism and overcrowding. The Louvre was actually taking steps to reduce visitor numbers after it just got very uncomfortable. And any of you who've been to the Vatican museums will recognize the words of the tour guides who say that it used to be an overcrowded hell, ironically, and hoping that COVID might change that. And in the wider world, sort of questions around ethical sourcing, supply chains. We saw, again, COVID sort of shone a light in Leicester. Boohoo was one of the fashion brands that has very much been under the spotlight. But I remember a couple of years ago listening to somebody from the National Trust talking about the challenges of creating an ethical supply chain, and saying that he wasn't even going to say anything about it publicly until they'd probably been working on it for about 5 years. And talking of retail, this is back in January, we were talking about the death of the high street, nothing to do with COVID then. It was really about the idea that retail was challenged by the internet, and indeed by things like business rates and rents, and just the lack of propensity of people to come into the high street. So what do we do? We've come, this is V-Day, this is Vaccine Day, very, very exciting. And after the 90-year-old Lady Rose, who was the first person in Britain and indeed the world to have the vaccine, I gather William Shakespeare was the second. I'm heard that on the Today programme, so if you don't believe me, go and check. But who said Build Back Better? Was it Joe Biden or Boris Johnson? Not natural bedfellows, but and Boris there seems to have just gone for the build mantra with, I'm sure, the curated symbolism of high-vis and hard hats and boots. But both of them, from different ends of the political spectrum, saying we need to build back better. And we've heard this message over and over and over. And the more I've thought about it, the more I've sort of thought, do I agree with that? Do I think that's what we need to do? Well, you know, looking for signs of better, I guess. One of my sort of lockdown wins was I became a fellow of the RSA. A lot of the appeal, I have to say, was the very cool building in London that the RSA has. And of course, I haven't been able to visit it at all since becoming a fellow. But I was very pleased and proud to see that the RSA commissioned this survey that was widely quoted during the first lockdown, which said that only 9% of Brits wanted to go back to normal. They'd really sort of appreciated the cleaner air, you know, spending more time at home and with close loved ones, maybe learning how to cook or where their food comes from, even doing DIY, although I must admit, I'm with the man I saw on Homes Under the Hammer the other day. Of course, one of the benefits of working from home is Homes Under the Hammer, who said that DIY meant to him, don't involve yourself. And then gardening, of course, and people, this is a very recent article on the right here, people discovering that there are 4 seasons, and actually you can buy plants that will grow in the garden now, or certainly plant for the spring, or indeed bring house plants into your home. So all these sort of good things starting to happen. Prince Harry called on the tourism industry to build back better. He was talking specifically about building back to a sustainable tourism. We were talking earlier about over-tourism, and I think one of the most poignant and in some ways hopeful symbols of the first lockdown was to see the canals of Venice running clear. And did we really want to go back to them being completely polluted and Venice overrun with tourists? But of course, by the same token, many communities, both here in the UK and indeed all around the world, including in developing countries, need tourism. So how would it be built back better? And Mary Porter's turning back to retail. I was lucky enough to hear Mary speak at the Spring Fair at the NEC in February, before we really knew what was coming down the line. And she was talking about the idea that we need to move to a kindness economy. She actually said that when she set up her consultancy business, their sort of key value was whatever Philip Green would do, we will do the opposite. And of course, Kate Moss there, the sort of poster girl for Topshop and for fast fashion, and not Kate, I'm not talking about Kate, but Mary certainly talking about the sort of relentless and unsustainable pursuit of growth, which has stopped, and which again she is arguing should not be sort of gone back to. So I mentioned the RSA, and the RSA has produced this framework for planning the future, and it sort of encompasses the things in the top left box, the things that we did because we had to respond to the crisis. On the right, the things that we did that actually we'd like to perhaps do more of or explore expanding. Obviously, many museums and other attractions have been very ingenious in terms of the way they've engaged with audiences during lockdown, and also how they've remodeled their visitor experience post-lockdown, albeit, I would argue, not necessarily at a level at which they are sustainable, financially sustainable. Then in the bottom left corner, ideas around things that we stopped doing and actually we shouldn't really go back to, because they weren't great before, and we've had the excuse to stop doing them, so let's just park them. And things, however, that we did stop, that we do need to restart, albeit in some form. And this framework has already been being used by organisations via RSA fellows all around the world. And I had a very interesting conversation with Ian Burbidge of the RSA, who actually created the framework. And I said, I do think this is great, but I still have this feeling that, building back better is going to mean a sort of, ultimately, a bit of an incremental move forward. We'll kind of leave the things that we shouldn't have been doing, but we'll sort of probably end up restarting some of them again. And the things that we did because of COVID that were really cool and different, we might sort of think that we don't have to do them anymore because COVID is coming to an end. It just all still feels as if there needs to be, to the far right of this model, a shining vision of what the future looks like, and that future should be, as far as possible, based on taking a creative leap from what we know, what we've learned, what we know about our audiences and our customers, new perspectives, new values, those old challenges of a few months ago that we were dealing with and are still dealing with, whether it's Black Lives Matter or environmental sustainability, or just an equitable society and supply chains that are good for people, not bad for people, and actually sort of create a real vision of a better world, a better museum, a better visitor attraction, a better and more engaging and more enriching experience, and then work back from that. So, okay, if that's where we want to get to, what would that look like if that's in 10 years' time, what would it look like in 9 years' time, in 8 years' time, in 5 years' time? And therefore, what do we have to start doing with this model to move to that future? And Ian Burbidge of the RSA kind of agreed with me, and this is a conversation that will continue. So I am suggesting that we don't talk about building back better, which does imply looking back and trying to get back to a sort of diluted version or a slightly improved version of what we were doing before. But we think forward, we build forward to something that is better, that we all knew before COVID we needed, but we just didn't know what it looked like. And COVID has given us some clues and pointers. So we now have what we call an intermission, which is a chance for Dean and Sarah to pitch in with ideas, comments, questions from yourselves on the things that I've been talking about. Guys, are you there?
I'm here. Thank you very much, Stephen. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, really interesting points there, looking at sort of where we've been and where we might indeed go. I mean, if anybody's got any questions, do put them in the comments and we can sort of respond to those. It's a good opportunity to do that now. I'll sort of kick off with one thought, really, is do you think the sector has responded well so far to the crisis?
Oh, yes, definitely. I mean, I've worked with a number of attractions over the crisis who have, I think we take our hats off to all of them for the enormous amount of agility, of flexibility, of commitment that people in our cultural institutions have shown. They've had to just keep almost making it up as they went along, as it seemed almost that the government was doing that in terms of the restrictions, and dealing with visitors who, right at the start, if you remember when the first lockdown was eased, were just so happy to be back. But I know now that people are sort of becoming a bit more demanding again, and sort of starting to say, well, why can't I have the normal catering experience or the normal retail experience, or oh, you're making me stay outside but it's raining and I'm not happy about that. So they're facing those kind of real world challenges now, which is inevitable because that's human nature. I do think the agility and the ingenuity that has been shown with the online experience as well as the physical experience has been conspicuously brilliant. But of course, it's not going to pay the bills, is it? That's the point. It's not going to keep the roof on. So there has to be a model that is perhaps more online and than it was before, but a blended experience, we would call it. But that has to be a business model as well, that has to show how we can do business, given that our customers and visitors may have higher expectations of us in terms of some of these wider issues, and make enough money to be sustainable, to sustain the employment that we provide, to sustain the economic contribution that we make to our community, etc., etc.
I think that's really important, that obviously working within the parameters of where we are in the situation with one eye on the future to move forward, but also at the same time, understanding people's frustrations with, particularly as the weather turns and, all the challenges that might bring with them. What sort of steps do you think that museums can take to sort of understand their clients' wants and needs a little better, maybe?
Well, I think, that there is talking to people, but I always remember the quote by Henry Ford, who said, if I'd asked my customers what they wanted, they'd have said faster horses. And so, I'm not against focus groups. I think it's really important to talk to customers and visitors, but I often think you learn more by actually finding out what they think of what you're doing, and therefore you can improve the actual visitor journey than necessarily asking them to predict the future. But I think, I've certainly taken the advantage, I know you have, and I'm sure others have, of the time that we've had during lockdown to just immerse myself in surveys, in trends reports, going to webinars on all sorts of things across all sorts of sectors, from garden centres who've been doing extremely well, to retail, to hospitality, which obviously has again been very challenged, but many businesses have responded very creatively. Just understanding what is happening in the wider world, because these are the sort of the mega trends which ultimately affect how people behave. And if you start to understand those, you can start to think about, well, what could our organization or our business look like? So I think it's a combination of, yes, talking to visitors, but I also think it's about really becoming a student of not just your sector but of consumer behavior, and that's obviously what we focus on, is how customers actually respond to what we're all doing.
Absolutely. Sarah, is there anything you want to add? Have we got any comments in the chat?
There is one comment, yeah, and it's regarding the sustainability element. And while it's important to focus on real sustainability, obviously, how do you balance that with a level of commercial growth?
Well, I think we've almost got, again, another thing that COVID has given us is the fact we have to think about a business model that is actually going to work on the basis of fewer visitors for the foreseeable future. A lot of institutions, obviously, particularly in London, but also in other parts of the country, reliant on inbound tourism, which has gone for the time being. I think it will recover quicker than a lot of the predictions once the vaccine really is rolled out. But the worst case predictions of the World Tourism Organization are 5 years for inbound tourism to recover. We know, footfall on the high street is down, and that's not all because people are shopping online. It's because people are nervous, and also because the offer isn't necessarily as I hesitate to use the word exciting, but is sort of not as comprehensive as it was. So, in short, I think we have to think about, and this is why customer experience is such an important art and science, maximizing every interaction between every customer or visitor that we do have, and at the same time, in order to facilitate that, maximizing the experience of our employees and our volunteers. I'm a trustee of Abbotsford, Sir Walter Scott's house in the Scottish Borders, and it's nothing to do with me. They have done an incredible job over this past year of keeping their volunteers engaged, many of whom are vulnerable, so haven't been able to come into work. Abbotsford absolutely depends on its volunteers. 3/4 of the workforce are volunteers and literally doing real jobs, not just sort of standing in rooms. And the way in which Abbotsford has kept them engaged, kept them motivated through quizzes and through using social media to allow them to demonstrate gardening skills or cookery skills, curator talks online, has been absolutely brilliant. Again, it's then thinking how you monetize these things. I think the key to it is, this is something that Joe Pine, who is the godfather of the experience economy and wrote the book, The Experience Economy, and has been very active this year talking about the implications of COVID for the experience economy. This is what he said. What would your organization look like if you could charge for the experience? So I know some of you do charge, but for example, you don't charge for admission to the shop, but what would your shop look like if people had to pay to get in? What exclusivity, what added value could you offer? By the same token, if your museum is free, why would anybody pay to come into it? Go back a step beyond that. Why would somebody get out of bed and come into town and visit your museum? What's compelling about it that they can't get online? So I think the short answer is we have to work out how we get more out of the customers and visitors that we will have, albeit at lower numbers, and then turn that into a virtue. Actually fewer people visiting does mean a better experience for those who do visit. It does mean potentially less of a carbon footprint. But how do we make sure we engage people who aren't visiting, so we're not kind of shrinking in terms of our global or local influence and reach? Don't know if that answers the question. I hope so.
I actually have another question in the chat as well, if I can put that to you now, or do you want to save that and move on to the next part?
Go for it.
It's all about the access that consumers have had to digital content throughout the pandemic. And it's a question about how you go about monetizing that digital experience, especially with numbers probably staying lower in the buildings for a short while longer, at least.
Yes, well, again, this is something that Joe Pine has been talking about. It is this idea that, I realized that I was a customer experience specialist or geek when I realized that it was the details that really, when you put them in front of the customer, excite the customer, that I was really interested in. That it's great to have a grand plan, and it's great to have a big vision, and it's great to spend lots of money on infrastructure, and commission big name architects and large design agencies and all the rest of it. But actually, it's what happens in those interactions between the customer and your offering that make all the difference. And so over the next few months, some of the advances in digital content and digital provision need to turn into experiences that people will actually pay for. And I think this is really important because there's a lot of evidence to show that although people are still, they're still going to virtual conferences and virtual webinars and so on, they are also not particularly engaging with them. So they may well have, in fact, some of the audience who are here now, dare I say it, may have this webinar on in the background while they're doing something else more interesting. I know that's almost unthinkable, but the point is, what would you have to do to get people to pay for the experience, and then they would be engaged because they paid for it? The Tourism Society are running. They ran all through 2020 a weekly think tank, which was an opportunity for people to just come together. There was a guest speaker and think about some of the issues affecting tourism. And but they, like every organisation, they need money. A lot of their members have either fallen away or haven't been able to pay their membership subscriptions, and they haven't been able to hold any events. So they put a program together over December with some quite high-profile speakers, including Andy Burnham, and they've said basically it's £25 for the 3, and indeed, why not gift the 3 sessions to a client or somebody that you think would find it interesting to attend these 3 lunchtime sessions. So I think it's about creating the idea of a club, something, a bit of exclusivity. It's about offering content that is not available without paying for it, that would be of interest to your particular audience or segments of your audience. It's thinking about what else you could offer. I mean, is there a sort of physical element as well, something that you could send to your audiences that they would maybe unwrap or eat or listen to whilst they were participating in the online experience as well? So, we don't have all the answers, but what we're saying is you can't just be accepting that digital content is something that people expect for free, and nor can you think that you can just start charging for digital content that was previously free. I think you really have to think, why would people pay for this? And that is a thought process that really requires you to understand your audience. I've got a post-it note on my whiteboard that says, be irresistible to a specific group of people. So I think, this idea of audience segmentation or market segmentation that tends to be left to the marketing department needs to be done by the whole organization. Who are we talking to, and how can we really, really know these people so that we can really design experiences that they will pay for because they get a lot of value? I could go on, but I realize that there is somebody else who has, well, actually it's me again, but there is somebody else on this webinar who will be speaking at some point.
Thank you very much, Stephen. So let's leave control with you, actually, and in my best Boris Johnson impression, next slide, please.
Thank you.
Oh, no, that's
you. If it feels like we've maybe been talking not so much about museums, here's just a couple of sort of taking this thinking a bit further. I was very interested to find out about this competition, Reimagining Museums for Climate Action, organised by the Arts and Humanities Research Council. I read a lot of articles about this, and I think I just about understand it now. But what was so interesting was what Colin Sterling of UCL, one of the organisers, says here. While some responded with proposals to create more sustainable museum buildings or develop new exhibitions on climate change. Absolutely, that's what you'd kind of expect. Others sought to redefine the very foundations of museological thinking and practice. So, you know, really asking the question, what would a museum look like if we invented it today? He says, for some museums, looking to the future in this way will mean confronting their own complicity in many of the forces that have brought the planet to the brink of ecological collapse. I don't tend to use quite such apocalyptic language. I think it is clearly important that museums, you know, face up to their history, and also that they do become more inclusive and more welcoming to everyone. But I think, again, this theme of building back better versus building forward better, you know, don't spend all your time on that. Think about, well, you know, could a museum be a force for change? Could a museum be a place that, rather than making people just think about what we were like in the past, really want to go out and take action to make a better future? And I think that's where museums could and arguably should go. By the way, the finalists are currently developing their ideas for an exhibition which will be at the Glasgow Science Centre ahead of the UN Climate Change Conference in November 2021, for those who are interested. And Tim Smith, who's one of my heroes, as you, I'm sure, know, founded the Eden Project. And now Eden is reimagining Morecambe as a seaside resort for the 21st century, inspiring wonder and a connection with the natural world, inspired by Eden Project's focus on education, ecology, and community. About 15 years ago, I was working for the National Trust for Scotland, and we just joined ALVA, and my first ALVA meeting was at the Eden Project. And so if you can imagine, I got on a train in Edinburgh. I didn't really know. I'd been in Scotland for about 5 years. I didn't really know very much about the Eden Project. I got off the train in Penzance, got into a minibus, was taken to the Eden Project, taken into one of the biomes, had a glass of wine, and then found myself sitting at dinner with Tim Smith. And I asked him, what is this place all about? And he said, well, he said, this will sound arrogant, but I want to change the world. And he went on to explain that he wanted people to get turned on by the idea of, you know, rediscovering our relationship with the planet and plants in particular. And he said, you know, you do that by making it sexy, by making it enjoyable. And I always remember after dinner, he made a speech, as was the form. And at the time, many of the ALVA members were sort of men in dark suits. And Tim was standing with, you know, pair of jeans, rather battered velvet jacket, cigar in one hand, glass of red in the other. And he said, who here can tell me that their visitor attraction is exciting? And, you know, I think about one person put their hand up, and he said, well, if you can't tell me that your visitor attraction is exciting, if you don't believe that, then how do you expect anyone else to be excited by what you do? And I think, you know, this is a very powerful and important point, that people really do need to be turned on to be motivated to take action. And if museums are places, as I believe they should be, for people to become equipped with the knowledge and inspired to take action to make a better world, then they have to also be fun. They have to be sexy. And I 100% agree with Tim Smith. And I think, you know, the success of Eden and the exciting developments bear him out. So just to bring this back to thinking about your audience's experience of your institution, or again, if you're running a museum shop or the business side of an organization, then your customers. The STARS model really contains the 5 elements that you need to think about. The story encapsulates a lot of what we've been talking about. Your purpose. There's lots and lots of evidence that consumers are looking for purposeful businesses that do more than just make money, but they also do good. Within the story is also your mission, which I define as your business mission, what you need to achieve. Your vision, which I define as why the customer should be excited by that, so what it looks like to them to get involved with you. And of course your values, so how you go about your business. And your story then is translated into your brand, your marketing messaging, etc., the way you talk to donors and supporters and stakeholders. But it needs to be clear, and it needs to be effectively communicated. And in this new world, it needs to be relevant, and it needs to be sustainable. What you're setting out to do needs to have a basis in the future, not in the past. Very briefly then, this is delivered through these 4 elements of team, all the people that deliver to the customer or to the audience, whether they're staff, volunteers, but also suppliers, even the community could be part of this. And I think this is a time for thinking about team and really investing time and effort into developing your team. Ambience is all the ways in which your customer or audience experiences your story. So it could be the physical setting, it could be the virtual setting as well. Recipients are, of course, the customers, the audience, and as we've said, needing to really understand them now is more important than ever. And finally, systems. I always used to say that systems was the sort of forgotten part of managing world-class visitor experiences. But of course, systems have been to the fore this year. It's all been about safety, and it's all been about managing, capacity managed experiences. That's great, but there are also systems that need to work to support the delivery of your story in relation to team, from recruitment through to development, in terms of maintenance and evolving and developing and reinvesting in the experience, sales and marketing, data capture, communication, business development, innovation. All these things need to be systematized to support the delivery of your experience. And remember this, it's so basic, but I do think it's actually quite interesting, and again, this age, how people experience is through their 5 senses. And we, at the moment, are living mainly through 2 of them, sight and hearing. But remember that taste, this interest that people now have in food, and smell, which is such a powerful trigger of emotion and memory, and touch, when people can touch again, think how much, when somebody holds something in their hand, it becomes real to them. In shops, people buy 60% more likely to buy when they have a product in their hand. And in terms of hearing, don't forget, music plays a huge role in creating ambience, in influencing the way people feel, and again, buying behaviors. And of course, what they see when they come onto your website, when they engage with you, both physically and virtually, is incredibly important. Does the message, does the story hit them between the eyes? Is it relevant? Is it clear? And then is it authentic and consistent through the experience? And this all takes place in what I call the customer realm. So wherever your customer or visitor experience takes place is what I call the customer realm. It's where it happens. It's Disney call it the setting. And again, it could be virtual, physical, or a combination of the 2. And within that realm, obviously you have got things that you want your customers to engage with. There's information up on the second floor there. Sorry, the first floor there is sign up. So, you know, sign up to my newsletter, become a member, become a supporter. There are things that you want people to buy. There are facilities, there are amenities, and of course, there's the core experience. We think it's really important to think about how your customers journey through your experience, both online and offline, and to literally map all the touch points. There's a fantastic short book by Jan Carlsen, who was chief executive of Scandinavian Airlines in the 80s, and he wrote the book. It was called Moments of Truth. And moments of truth are the touch points that underpin or undermine your story. They define your brand for your customer. And he said, in relation to Scandinavian, we have 50,000 moments of truth every day. So literally, this is an exercise you can do with your team. I've run this as a training session where different departments from the same institution are suddenly thinking about the whole customer journey and not just their bit of it. And then you can start to introduce ideas around how the visitor is thinking, feeling, what they want at different points in the experience, and ultimately, is it congruent with the story? And so you end up with something that looks quite complicated like this, and that contains all of those moments of truth, but also some of the ideas around what people see and experience through their senses. What are the psychological messages? You know, are you trying to make people respond in a certain way? Do you want people to sign up? Do you want them to trade up? Is there an upsell? And then emotionally, ultimately, people buy with emotion. And I think they respond with emotion. So how do you want people to feel? Do you want them to feel guilty? Or do you want them to feel excited? Do you want them to feel that they want to take action? Do you want them to feel that they are very proud of being part of a sort of exclusive club that could be that that paid for online content, or a special, you know, a members room in the museum or whatever it is? And remember, all of this ultimately is designed around your guiding star, your model of your world-class customer experience. And I always say also, don't try and do it all at once. You know, maybe just start by thinking about the physical journey, including online, and then start to think about areas where you could improve, or one area that you could really focus on, or whether you really need to focus on emotion, or whether you really need to focus on the buying behaviors, so actually the psychology of how you get people to spend more money, or whatever it is. But as soon as you start to think about the fact that I have an experience, people come to it and they experience it in their own way, and what can I do to develop that and even take control of it, then the sooner you start to really have the ability to translate strategy and vision into sustainable reality. Hooray, it's another intermission. Do we have any more questions, comments, or are we cracking on with Dean at this point?
I don't have any questions in the chat. Just to say that someone has commented just before the last intermission, actually, that they are, it was Laura Dixon from University of Exeter, and they are commissioning some research about the digital content and monetization. And a few people have commented asking Laura for contact information and stuff. So just so you know, that's been happening in the chat. Everyone seems really interested in the results of that. Also, we're running over. So if anyone needs to disappear, by all means do. Like I said, it is being recorded, but if everyone is still happy, then I'm very happy to carry on and carry on with Dean, but just wanted to address that we are running slightly over. So apologies for that, but if you do need to go, by all means do. But also people are commenting that it's been an inspiring session. So I will shut up now. I'm over to you, Dean.
Well, I will hope to continue that, and let's hope the numbers don't drop off too dramatically. Stephen, I'm happy if you want to keep on your screen share, if that's easier.
Oh, okay.
We've got the same presentation, so we can just go to the next slide.
Right, hang on. It's I think I did whatever I did before. I've done it again.
I'll tell you what. Shall I take control?
Just give me one more chance to redeem myself.
Just one more.
There we go.
There we go. Right. Thank you very much. So yeah, a lot of the points that Stephen was mentioning there about offering an inclusive and cohesive experience, I think is vital for the sector, but I think it would also be useful to look at some parallel industries to see maybe some of the innovation that's going on there, what various companies are doing. The first one that I'd like to look at is actually Selfridges, a name that we'll all be familiar with, and just the way that they approach a very full customer experience. Obviously, the core of their business is in selling mostly luxury, but many other brands as well, throughout sort of fashion, through homewares, through a number of different areas. We've got the in-store experience. Obviously, we've got an online experience as well. But they've got a cinema in store. They organise events. They're very proactive in keeping up with their community and actually sort of building people who are very, very loyal to their brand. And, you know, I think they're a very good example of, you know, department stores, probably the toughest sector of retail of all at the moment. And, you know, with the likes of Debenhams very recently, and, you know, House of Fraser just last year, very strong examples of what can go wrong in that sector, but Selfridges is riding it out very well nonetheless. And I think that seems due in no part to the variety of offer that they extend out to their audience. IKEA, a brand very innovative and have a very, very broad target audience. Most homes these days will have at least one item from IKEA within them. But one of the ways that they're innovating at the moment is that they're actually offering to buy back our old furniture, to resell, to reuse, to recycle, as part of their business model, which I think is really fascinating to sort of see how that will go. Combine that also with the fact that, you know, their latest store in Greenwich is, you know, very environmentally friendly. I believe it's carbon neutral. It's got, you know, sort of green roof. It's got recycled materials throughout, and is kind of an example of the way that I think a lot of retail will indeed be going. So I think that's a really important example to look at. The third example on here is Monaco, a brand which you may be familiar with. Their core offering really being print and a magazine and journalism, but actually looking at their whole 360 offering in the fact that, you know, they've got a 24-hour radio station, they run events, they've got shops, they've got a very good online offer, and just really looking at how they're engaging with their audience across, you know, numerous different touch points, and the way that they really kind of build a club, as it were. You know, whether you subscribe or whatever, is really neither here nor there. Obviously, that's their ultimate game. But just the way that they're operating across a number of different sectors, from the little shop in George Street, the cafe in Marylebone, they've got another one in Tokyo. They're a truly global operation, but actually one that speaks very well to its particular niche audience. And then in the product sector, you've got GoPro, who have been very innovative with their marketing, in the fact that a lot of their marketing is actually through user-generated content on their YouTube channels. They encourage their users to upload their own material that they've used GoPro products with. And so once it's set up, it's kind of free marketing, it's free publicity, and it generates a life of its own through the community that really loves what GoPro produce. And so, you know, looking at their YouTube channel is a great way of seeing how user-generated content could apply to, you know, any sector and indeed any product. And I think, you know, these are 4 diverse examples that I think, you know, we should look very closely at how they're innovating and maybe look at how that relates to our own sectors. So, yeah, next slide, please. I wanted to say that. Do we have the next slide?
We don't.
Oh.
I don't know why. Hold on. Sorry, everyone. This is all my fault. There you go.
Here we are. Right. Okay. So something else I wanted to look at, and this is something that Stephen briefly touched on earlier, is about having something for everyone. Now, most people, you know, we're all concentrating on our core product experience, the venue, the museum. It's what we do. But actually, we can look either side of this as well. And let's go to the one end first of all with the free experience. Now, even if you don't actually charge an admission fee for your museum or your venue, what I'm talking about here is something that's accessible to everybody, even if they never set foot in your museum or haven't today. It's what can you offer people for free that's of value, that's going to actually get them interested and engaged with your brand. So that could be webinars, that could be an email newsletter, that could be the YouTube channel, that could be any number of different things. It could be free admission to the grounds if you're charging for the core experience. But actually, you know, let's look at how can we broaden this out and actually really engage a wider audience who maybe only have a passing interest in your particular offer, but nevertheless will be something that they can get value from and actually engage with, which will draw them in. It will pull them in to your brand and actually get them to start to engage with your content and actually, you know, start them on the journey to becoming, you know, a fully paid up member or visitor of your attraction. And then at the other end of the scale, the VIP end, it's kind of like, how can you upsell? And how can you actually not just upsell to people who are already engaging with your brand, but actually how can you offer something that's aspirational to those that are acknowledging what you're doing from right across the board? So that could be, you know, that could be one-on-one tours, that could be talks, that could be guest speakers in person, that could be black tie events, that could be any number of things, you know, leave that to your imagination. But, you know, just to offer a sort of gold VIP standard, that although we talk about inclusivity, we want a little bit of exclusivity as well. We want something to aspire to, something that actually, if we really love what you guys are doing, we can actually pay that extra premium to get an additional service or an additional benefit, an additional involvement with what you do on a day-to-day basis, and actually maybe see behind the scenes, or you know, just get a little extra special treatment. And I think that's a really sort of valuable thing to look at the full spectrum of the people that are engaging with your brand. So Stephen, back to you.
Thank you. There we are. Yes. So just really to, I guess, make our penultimate comments on this. Just going back to your model there, Dean. Obviously, as you've said, a lot of museums are free, and they've always had to work hard to maximise their income on the basis that they are free, and perhaps with local authority or DCMS subsidies and funding reducing if not available at all. and some others have always charged for admission. And the key really is thinking about this idea of, ideally, what would everybody's experience look like if they were a VIP? And I think VIP doesn't have to imply, you know, elitism, does it, Dean? It's really about whatever makes, you know, floats your boat, which could be a whole range of activities or interests.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not something that needs to be seen as elitist by any means at all. It just means something that you can offer to the most engaged, you know, the people who are the real raving fans of what you do. And, you know, it's something whereby you can, you know, offer something exceptional. It's something extraordinary that maybe you've not been able to offer before. Maybe you've just not, you know, had the facilities to do before. And I think also the fact that for the foreseeable future, visitor numbers are going to need to be lower in terms of the amount of footfall through at any given time. I think this is a huge opportunity to actually look at, you know, how can you enhance that experience? How can you apply a little bit of gold standard to your offering?
Absolutely. And you know, for some people, less is definitely more. In fact, I think, you know, that might be the mantra of 2021. You know, less is more. We can have better quality conversations, engagements with our customers and visitors if there are fewer of them. But that also means we have the opportunity to, you know, for the want of a better word, to really sell to them, whether it's selling ideas or selling products or selling memberships or selling the idea that, you know, they leave us a legacy. We just have much more ability to and need to really understand the motivations and the values of our audiences, and focus on obviously the ones that are going to be there for the foreseeable future, and design journeys, both physical and virtual, for them that enable them to get, you know, the most out of the relationship. It's a symbiotic relationship, isn't it? They will spend more money or give more time or give more commitment, the more they get out of it, and that is, you know, just as much about feeling that they're valued and making a contribution as it is getting stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is all about really just engagement, really driving engagement on you know, loving what you do. You know, people in the museum sector, obviously they're going to be very invested in, you know, in their collections, in their venues, in their organisation as a whole, and actually, you know, really communicating that passion with your audience who have, you know, a similar feeling for, you know, your particular sector, and really sort of driving that engagement and actually adding value to it.
I'll just finish, because I think before Sarah hauls us off the stage, we should think about finishing. But I always just give this very simple example of why I think it is very often museums and attractions sort of hide their light under a bushel or a barrel. I was working with a museum, I can't remember which one it was, and we were trying to develop a new concept for their shop, and I kept asking them, you know, what do you have in your museum? And they kept telling me about, you know, a pot and, you know, a coin and other things, and a designer that I hadn't heard of, which doesn't mean that they weren't an important designer. But anyway, they weren't, I wasn't excited by any of it. And I kept saying, come on, there must be something else. And somebody said, and I'm sure there'll be people on this webinar who'll know exactly where I'm talking about. Oh, we have King Harold is buried beside our site. And at that point I said, what? Right. Okay, we've got it. We've now got the cut through, the thing that everyone has heard of, the thing that everyone can respond to. And so within literally an hour, they designed this amazing concept for their shop that was all based around the Bayeux tapestry. And you know, it's not all about celebrity or fame or, you know, the big issues that everyone's heard of, but it is about finding that hook. I always say superlatives, you know, the first, the last, the best, the only, the biggest, the smallest, people do respond to those. So, this is, I guess, a marketing message. But then you've got to turn your marketing into reality, and that's where the customer journey planning comes in. Dean, thank you. I feel we should sort of sum up. So the key sort of takeaways is really for people to think about where we've been and where we were before, and these issues that are the, if you like, the mega trends, the issues that will still be there even when COVID has been suppressed. Of course, there could be other pandemics in the pipeline, but really thinking about where we don't want to go back to. I think that RSA future framework model is a very good one. I'm very happy to share that with people if they would like. Think deeply then about experience, what the experience is, where it happens, when it happens, and how it happens, because that is ultimately how you're going to engage with your audiences, really understanding who they are now and where and how they'll interact with your organization in the future. And then finally, as I hope we've showcased, explore case studies and techniques for planning the future. Avoid path dependency. Path dependency is the idea that, we go back to the safe path that we were on before because we now know it's not safe and actually it's probably not viable. And to do that, look at the world beyond your sector. All the big things that are happening in the world are the things that ultimately will affect how your customers behave and how they react to what you offer. So really important to have that wider knowledge. So with that, we say thank you. And if there are any further questions, please let's have them. But do get in touch if you'd like to know more, or if we can respond or even share your ideas, because we're all about collaboration. So good luck. Merry Christmas, happy Vaccine Day, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, everyone.